All right, hello everybody. It's the Meista from Brews and Tunes. Cheers. I am absolutely thrilled today. I am chatting with the one and only Mr. Jeff Young, of course, of Megadeth fame, and now with a very cool band, Kings of Thrash. Also has done work with Adi Bazad. You've done work with, you've got your project, Project 222. You've got Tenor for Gin, solo work. You've done a lot of amazing stuff, but thank you so much for joining me, Jeff. Thank you. I'm really excited to be chatting with you today.
Nice to be chatting with you all. I love your studio
Oh,
and
thank you.
the colorful walls behind you, very vintage looking. And thanks for mentioning Tenor for Jen and all those projects. Yes, but 222, I never did that project. I didn't end up doing that. There was
Oh,
some
okay.
press that came out, said I was going to do something with them. She was a sweet girl, but I didn't end up doing that after all.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Another fish to fry.
Well, so I think one of the big exciting things that's happening right now, very exciting things, as for me personally, especially, is you have joined forces with your ex Megadeth bandmate, Mr. David Ellefson, and are doing Kings of Thrash, where you're playing. Well, I don't want to steal your thunder. I'll let you talk about it. It's amazing. And yeah, can you tell us a little bit about what that is, what that project is, and what's going on with that right now?
Currently, we're less than 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks away from last night from our first show in Juliet, Illinois. We hope anyone within 100-mile radius is going to make the trek out to see us. We're kicking off about a month-long tour of the Midwest. It's Thrash in USA,
Cool.
performing So Far, So Good, So What, and Killing Is My Business and Business Is Good, both in their entirety, right?
Nice.
We took great care to learn them all the way. I still have the cassettes that I went down to Capitol Records
Oh,
and had
cool.
the engineer get the 2-inch masters for, well, this is Peace Cells, all of Chris Poland's rhythms and solos,
Oh,
where
nice.
you take, it's called, you solo that instrument, which means you mute the entire band. So it's just his rhythms and solos. So that's what I did to learn the parts back in the day. And by some miracle of miracles, and I think that this is kind of destiny, what we're doing, I held on to that. And on this tape is Chris's solos, half speed. They're at full speed and half speed,
Oh, wow.
you know, because we didn't have YouTube or trainers back then. And I want to make sure. Are you still there? Because it froze up again. I don't
Yep,
want to
I'm
lose
here.
you.
I'm here. Yep.
This has all Mustaine's rhythms from Killing,
Okay, wow.
and the solos. Chris's solos half speed. I had to figure out Mustaine's that I do by ear because I didn't slow them down back in the day because I wasn't having to learn those. But yeah, between these two tapes, I mean, we went on a pretty deep dive to play these songs and these albums that are pretty underplayed. They're not really being played anywhere else. So we figured we might as well be the ones. We're the OGs that were on those records.
Yeah.
So we're doing those. Plus the encore is going to include some surprises, uh, some bands that don't include Megadeth, some stuff that we grew up on,
Cool.
music we love, maybe
Nice.
some friends getting up in certain cities for some guest appearances.
Oh, cool. That's really exciting news. And I know you also have you guys have some original material as well that you're working on and well, I think you just released one of them or about to release that.
We've got one on the way, near done. It's called Bridges Burn. We're hoping to bust that out on tour. You know, songs kind of write themselves, and you can manufacture them, but we all know what that sounds like.
Yeah.
But if you want to allow it to happen organically, you just kind of got to wait on the music, the notes, the lyrics, the guitar solo to arrive, you know. And we've been working on, this is how the whole project started. If we want to rewind back to just about a year ago, January last year, I was invited to participate in the life story of Nick Menza, which will soon be released as a documentary film on Ellefson Films. I ended up rooming with Nick on that tour to kind of escape the goings on that band that were, that I didn't want to be exposed to. And he was the drum tech at the time, but we became great friends. He was on my radio show, Music Without Boundaries. That's a great back episode for people to go check out.
Nice.
He was just a really persnickety, cool cat. And he was really alive and colorful. And it's just, of all the Megadeth members, I never thought that we'd be doing a documentary about his life in this context.
Right.
The night before we filmed here in LA, we all met at the Rainbow Bar and Grill at the back table. I hear Slash calls it his table. We call it the American Satan table. If you've seen that movie, if not, there's your movie recommendation for this evening.
All right.
Malcolm McDowell in the band in that movie has a pretty pivotal scene, and it's pretty epic and entertaining. We actually just met Malcolm this weekend at the Days of the Dead. We played in Atlanta at the horror convention. We had dinner the night before the Menza documentary filming. We were getting up to leave, and something hit me. I said, I better sing this riff in David Ellefson's ear and flash him back to must have been 89. Wow. We were demoing a couple tunes for what became Rust in Peace, but there was invitations to help with and contribute with the writing. So David and I were demoing some stuff up on cassette. Unfortunately, unlike these cassettes, I did not save those. I don't know what happened, but two of the riffs really stuck in my head, and I sang them in his ear. Right as we're paying the bill, he's like, dude, I totally remember those riffs. That's killer. We got to get in a room and work that stuff up.
Oh, wow.
So flash forward a couple months later, he was back in LA. I had another song idea that I actually started with a drum beat I had in Nick Menza's, and then I blew it out from there. He and I took those two riffs, demoed them, and a couple more months went by. He was back out in LA again. We got together, and he had a couple skeletons. And the cool thing about, we'd never really had that opportunity to write together. It was so fast and furious back in the day, but now it was like we were finishing each other's sentences, and we're more seasoned. We're better musicians. We're better songwriters. We're calmer, and there's no ego in the room. There's no toxicity in the room. Wink, wink. And the songs, we were just finishing each other's sentences, and we walked out of 2 writing sessions with 4 songs. One of them, there's a clip. We wanted to start a TikTok, got to keep up with all those crazy kids today. And
Right.
And so the first video I put up was just a little cell phone video from, it was the second writing day, and it's one of David's skeletons. And there was a solo section, and Mike Heller was just egging me on. He said, you got to put a solo there, or I'll throw a solo there. So I just improvised this thing. And I said, let me do a second take over the end of that. And I didn't really even think about the second part. I just played something without thinking. And when you hear it, it's kind of like a reverse Tony Iommi kind of thing. How he gets that backwards echo in Heaven and Hell.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. It just came out so cool. It was a first take. I thought that was a great way to start our TikTok. And kind of, we have a YouTube channel. Everyone's got their Facebooks and their Twitters and their this and that. It's cool to kind of leave little breadcrumbs in different places, not have everything everywhere. So that's really the only place you can get a little teaser of the original stuff so far. But we don't want people to misinterpret that we're just out there only doing Megadeth stuff.
Right.
Again, in the encore, we're going to be doing some stuff we grew up on that we really love. People are going to be surprised by that.
Nice.
and throwing the original stuff in the show ASAP.
Cool.
Working it up. We'll be working it up at sound check. So if you're standing outside, you'll probably hear bridges burning down the stage before doors open.
That's very exciting news. Very, very exciting news. And I know you guys put together a box set, mini box set of 2 CDs and a DVD of your show, your recent show at the Whiskey A Go Go, and that's called the Best of the West. I actually pre-ordered that. I think it comes out next month.
A lot of people I see are. A lot of people are getting it. I like that. We like seeing that. You know, it's kind of oddly enough that I have this sitting here. It's in the spirit of good old albums like Aerosmith Live Bootleg.
Oh, nice.
This great album by this great band. The cover is even somewhat, as you open it, you'll see a collage of pictures of us from the tour.
Awesome.
And it's coming out on vinyl in the summer. You know, it just takes longer.
Right.
But the label Cleopatra plug is they're really cool with vinyl, and they really love analog and everything that we're about. So yeah, we did 4 proof of concept kind of warm-up shows. It was San Diego, Phoenix. Just put a video up on our YouTube of Love to Death and Last Rites on our YouTube of that today from Arizona. We did Las Vegas at this kind of brand new off the beaten path club that had a PA that was about, the speaker on each side was like this big.
Wow.
We might have to rethink the venue next time we play Vegas. But then the Whiskey was the last night, and we did a 3-camera multi-track audio recording, and it came out pretty cool. You know, it's got a bit of HD hi-fi, a little bit of lo-fi garage band vibe to it. The Whiskey was sold out like they haven't been probably sold out in a while, and for sure they haven't seen stage diving.
Yeah,
mosh pits like what they saw that night. And for one night, because there's a sign right on the post right there where as you go upstairs and the audience can all see it, says, you know, no stage diving or you'll be evicted. But that night it was like we took people back to a moment in time, like 1988, 89, and they let it happen, and it was cool. And you see it all on the DVD, and you can see it in the we just released the single Wake Up Dead to radio today, and it's on our YouTube as well. Yeah. And that's actually taken right from the DVD. And so you can kind of see sometimes the cameras are still and sometimes the place is shaking, and you can see we're shaking the place in it. But that's what's cool about it. It's got that kind of, you know, garage band bootleg, but the audio is really high fidelity.
Yeah.
That's the real story about it. I mean, it's cool to see us and everything, but come out and see us. But to have the audio in that moment in time captured so clearly, and we mixed it at a really great studio here in North Hollywood I've been working at for a few years. Eddie Kramer's been working in there doing all the posthumous Jimi Hendrix releases. And there's so much music he recorded this album, People, Hell, and Angels. I can't recommend highly enough.
Great album.
And everyone I say, have you heard that? They go, no, I've never heard of that. Yeah. Right? Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I've got it. It's fantastic.
Is it killer?
It's amazing.
One guy, you're the first guy, high five, man. Yeah. They mix that, so same studio. I know Al Di Meola, George Lynch has been in there, but they have Christopher Cross's old, and I signal like this because it's huge. Like the old mixing boards, analog boards are, you know, good tone is what we say. We have a saying in Kings of Thrash about, you know, fractal amps and digital stuff, that good tone is heavy and hard to carry. And this board is like huge. I can't imagine how they got it in this room. But Christopher Cross did, you know, Ride Like the Wind and Sailing, and he sailed off into the sunset with his Millions. And they've kind of souped up his old API mixing board. And it's just got a great sound. I've worked on, you know, a lot of different types of board, and there's something about this one in this room. And the engineer there has been working with Eddie, kind of apprenticing with him for as long as I've been working at the studio, over near a decade. And so without paying the Eddie Kramer prices, We're getting the Eddie Kramer know-how and passing the savings on to you guys.
Cool.
And I think it's a great headphone listen and a great stereo listen. Like, I don't know if there's too many metal albums or thrash albums that folks would, maybe put on, like how people put on Pink Floyd or Steely Dan when they're checking out a home stereo system. But this could be one of them. Let me jump over here. I got this cool little cat, and she's running away with an earplug.
Oh, no.
I don't want her to eat it. Musicians, we got to protect our hearing,
Right.
It's Nigel Tufnell. I think he once said something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Maybe it's about tuning a piano and a fish or something.
Right.
I digress. So yeah, really stoked about how the audio came out. One of the best cameras that Whiskey's supposed to have 4 cameras, and the best one was out. They didn't have it running for some mysterious reason, because that's the Whiskey. But we actually hit up a lot of the people who posted video on YouTube who were there. And some of those folks, at least, half dozen or more, sent us video, and we incorporated the fan film footage in the DVD, which I think is pretty cool.
That's really cool. That's great. Yeah, and very kind of garage
You
band.
see some pit footage right there in front of Chris Poland. That dude was just, he was there. Right there.
So cool.
He got the footage to us, so that was pretty cool, because then it becomes interactive, and it's not just our DVD, it's like it's all your DVD. And we're going to do this again, Best of the Midwest, on this tour. So come out and film, and we'll get your footage, and you'll be part of the next opus.
Nice.
And this is 17 songs. It's not the whole show, but it's like the best of that night.
Okay.
Because it's one night in time. Most bands with a live album, they'll record 2 to 4 nights to get a live album. They'll pick the best songs from each night. We just wanted to get this one night in that one venue, and it's the best of the songs from So Far and Killing that came out good that night. And you might get the others on Best of the Midwest, and maybe when we go to Japan, Best of the East. And then we'll start, again, there'll be other songs, originals, stuff by other bands. We like, from Riot to Def Leppard, Saxon.
Oh, I love it.
That's
so cool. That's so cool. And you mentioned, Chris Poland played, did some guest performances. I'm assuming with, the first 2 albums, some songs from the first 2 albums. That's very cool. I did want to ask you, I was really curious about, so you have Chaz Leone and Fred Aching in the band. How did they get involved? And I love your cat. Beautiful.
This is Steely.
I like Steely.
She's cool.
Yeah, she's very cool.
I think that's her first time on camera.
Nice. Yeah, she looks like our cat, Biscuit.
She has her own Instagram, so follow Steely Cat on Instagram.
Oh, Steely, I will do that. Yeah, so I was curious about, how did Chaz and Fred get involved with you and David?
Well, that's kind of when things took a turn from working on David and I demoing some original stuff and maybe putting out an EP, and just for our pleasure, first and foremost. There's a jam that happens, oddly enough, and it's kind of this cool full circle thing with the DVD at the Whiskey a Go-Go every 2 weeks. It's called the Ultimate Jam. A lot of you folks have probably caught some previous videos and news stories about, they've done the Eddie Van Halen tributes, Randy Rhoads tributes, Ukraine, kind of awareness thing. We were actually there that night, and a band played a System of a Down tune. We were in the audience, so we didn't jam that night, but I was there with some friends, and a mosh pit broke out. And that's the first time I'd ever seen that at the Ultimate Jam.
Wow.
When the theme came out for the next one, 2 weeks later, the theme was the Big Four. So I guess they liked what they saw, and so that became the theme. And they invited me to get up and do a few songs. And of course, I was already writing with David, and I asked the organizers, you want me to ask him if I mean, he's in Arizona, so it really came down if he was willing to fly out to Los Angeles to do the show in Hollywood. But of course, they wanted him to, and he did. And the organizer match made us with a singer because you got me and David, but who's gonna sing and do the front person part? Uh, Great gal named Jessica Che. She has a YouTube channel. A lot of the Ultimate Jam videos are up there. She works with the Bullet Boys, who our drummer also plays with.
Oh, okay.
You can see him in their new video. She's got a real knack for matching these musicians because at these Ultimate Jams, you can have anywhere from, 75 over 100 people between every instrument coming on and off the stage.
Oh, wow.
And they can be, sometimes they're celebrities, right? From, Ralph from Steel Panther to, Phil X to whoever, or some of the best up and coming, like musicians around Hollywood. How's that all going to come together in an organized show? The team it's really cool. And there's a lot of thought. Chuck Wright is from Quiet Riot, and Alice Cooper and Montrose is I think he was the brainchild of it many years ago. And they've been doing it long before COVID. It was every week and now bi-weekly. She put us with Chaz because she knew he played in a Wake Up Dead tribute. Okay. And unrehearsed, you can see the first jam when it happened. It's on my YouTube, not on Kings of Thrash, but we did In My Darkest Hour, Mary Jane. My gal actually sang that. Dinah, who's in a all-female AC/DC tribute called Thunderstruck. They've been around over a couple decades.
Yeah.
Great AC/DC tribute, really cool group. She did Mary Jane, killed that. And then we did Peace Cells. And Ira Black, who's in Bullet Boys, got up and did that with us, jam with that. And the management saw it. It got picked up by, Blabbermouth and Brave Words and all the news that's fit to print. And they said, hey, you guys got to take this on the road. So it went from in one night, we were just doing it for a fun jam to, okay, maybe this could go on the road. And Fred also played that night, albeit not with us. He did some Slayer.
Oh, okay.
So it was actually on Jessica's channel. Then the next couple days, we were watching some of the videos, and we saw Fred playing Slayer. And then there was kind of the die had been cast from there, so to speak.
Nice. That's so cool. That's incredible. And it what I love about it, it was very organic. It was, this very.
Yeah. And that's the cool thing, and we wouldn't do it any other way. I mean, we didn't set out. We're doing these albums in their entirety because the fans have been asking David to do it at every convention he goes to, every shiprock he does,
Yeah.
And we get, in our private messages on Facebook, hey, it'd great if you guys would do a Megadeth reunion, and that's never going to happen. Especially, I mean, they can't ever get the Killing Is My Business lineup, because Gar has went on to bigger and better things. But I think we're killing it the way we're delivering the songs, and we're just getting better the more we do it. It's a whole different intent this time because the first time around, we hadn't played the So Far stuff since the late '80s. And a lot of the Killing stuff I'd never played, and some of it I don't know how much David's even played on stage, in the last 30 years. But so we still had like a million notes in our head, and they were all brand new and swirling around. And sometimes easily to get confused in a genre of a band. But now it's kind of when you go away and you've had time after we did those first 4 gigs, and then you let it kind of settle. And then it starts to bubble up again when you're getting ready for tour. And then you go through each song again, and then you manicure it again, kind of sculpt it even. Oh man, play this a little better. Oh, I can do this way. Or maybe you miss just one detail. So I think we're really going to be firing on all cylinders. We actually got rehearsal this weekend, early in the day, high noon, as they say, Saturday and Sunday. Getting ready to come knock you guys out.
Nice. That's so cool. That's great. I love the fact that you and I mean I guess reunited isn't the right word, but the fact that because you've been friends for a while, but the fact that you and Junior have gotten together and are doing some really amazing stuff. As you mentioned, there's a bunch of stuff up on your YouTube channel and the Kings of Thrash YouTube channel. For those of you watching, if you have not watched that, definitely check it out. The band sounds incredible. You guys sound amazing. I watched what's been posted from the Whiskey A Go Go show, and it just sonically it's very intense, and it kind of transported me back in a lot of ways to high school, and listening to this album back then and just how impactful that was. It's wonderful. It's so good to hear it again live, especially all of it. The fact that you guys are playing the entire album as well as the entire Killing, and then
even on that tour, we didn't get a chance to play a lot of those songs every night or even on half the tour. So we're still, coming into those songs and really enjoying being able to do it. It's so fresh now because we haven't even thought about that stuff for so long. And again, we're now better musicians. We're more chill. There's no egos in the room. Everyone's just stoked to be doing it and having a blast. And it's kind of like surfing, like when you're Laird Hamilton, sit on the surfboard waiting for the 30-foot wave, and the wave's coming. You're and you just paddling and you just ride it and have as much fun as you can.
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing. We're riding that wave right now.
That's a good philosophy.
A wave you never thought this might come again.
Yeah. That's great. That's so cool. So to switch gears a little bit, or maybe a lot, and I wanted to maybe take a ride on the Wayback Machine, and I was curious, kind of what was the start for you in music? What was the impetus? Did you come from a musical family? Like, how did you get started playing guitar or maybe another instrument prior to that?
My parents were kind of in the vibe of, like a 9 to 5 in their businesses by the time I was really thinking about how life worked. But I know my dad played drums in the Navy and my mom played organ. So there was kind of music, at least in their blood a little bit. Yeah. But I started playing viola in first grade when one of the teachers came around with the orchestral instruments. And I gave up pretty quick because I wanted to play cello. The viola was cool, but I wanted to play cello. And my mom didn't want to be the one to help a first grader carry that big cello everywhere. So she's like, So, like a first grader will do, you get frustrated, you didn't get your way and you give up. But then they came around with the band instruments, like the tubas and trombones and oboes and French horns. And I played tenor sax from 3rd grade to 9th grade. Actually, the last year I was playing baritone because they lost their baritone sax. So it was cool. I didn't think about it in the moment, but I got to learn bass clef really fast on the fly because, tenor sax and alto are written in treble clef, which is the one most people who've ever seen sheet music are familiar with. But then there's the bass clef for the lower instruments. And it was cool, again, not thinking about it in those years, because sometimes you didn't want to practice and didn't want to play these dorky songs that your conductor was making you play for marching band or in the school play or whatever. But you're learning how music works, how to read music, what quarter notes and half notes and syncopation is, and how to play with other people at a young age, where you're just learning about that ebb and flow and dynamics, playing loud and soft. Although I remember sometimes writing the performance just to spite him, and he'd be like wanting us to play so soft, and he'd be like, shh, and we'd be, so, and then all of a sudden just blow really loud just to spite him. And then the classmates in the audience just bust out. But, so then I discovered the guitar about 14. I was always into my parents got me the Beatles 65 album and the Partridge Family and all those different things as you're coming up and starting to get into UFO. I remember the early 8 tracks my buddies had, and we were getting into Montrose. Strangely, the bands I still love to this day, UFO, Montrose, Zeppelin, of course, and then you're starting to discover Aerosmith and all the ones that came behind,
Yeah.
Stars, Riot, Def Leppard, all the new wave of British heavy metal bands. And it just went from there. And it took me out to Los Angeles to GIT and Musicians Institute,
Oh yeah.
which was a great place to learn because it was a vocational school where it was hands-on. You're not taking social studies or trigonometry. You're hands-on guitar for a year solid with a lot of great teachers from Tommy Tedesco to Scott Henderson and Frank Gambale, all players that changed my life, right?
Very cool. Yeah, and you played a lot of classical and flamenco and blues, right? That's kind of, you were kind of doing a lot of that at the school, and then I
Well,
know
it was
you.
a process. I started because if you get into UFO from an early age, Michael Schenker has always been like the perfect blend of blues and classical, I think.
Yeah,
More than like most players that lean one way or the other. You can really hear a good mixture in his playing. So even like Bonjour Pleasurette on the Schenker album, like in my solo show, I do that piece. I mean, that's very classical
yeah,
and great, beautiful harmonized guitar. Ole John Roth, Scorpions, those early bands that I got into, they influenced Randy Rhoads and Richie Blackmore, and all these players influenced Van Halen to come out with pieces like D and the intro to Diary of a Madman and Spanish Fly, right? And
yeah.
so when I heard D and Spanish Fly, I found the best classical teacher in Dayton, in Centerville, and I started taking at that point, I always kind of was into that. I love Steve Morse, was always one of my favorite. He's always been in like my top 5 players. I remember he did a workshop at MI at GIT. That's one of the reasons that really caught my eye
Oh wow.
to go out to that school. And he came there when I was there, right? So that was super cool.
Oh, that's really cool.
I've got to meet, I've interviewed him on my show, and he was one of the best interviews I ever did. Just an amazing cat. But yeah, so that's the gist of.
Nice. And you started teaching. You were pretty young, like you were in your 20s when you started teaching guitar. And that's really kind of how you got into Megadeth in a kind of roundabout way, with Jay Reynolds, who was one of your students.
I can't remember. I forgot Steve Howe when I was mentioning like
Yeah.
for a day, like that just popped in my mind, like right, Steve Howe, and kind of like he was like the Steve Morse of rock. You kind of like those guys were kind of similar to me, but yeah, I I taught guitar lessons, back in Dayton. I would always take guitar lessons from any great teacher that I met, whether he was a buddy of mine. I remember this guitarist, Kurt James is his name. He played with Alcatraz for a while. He'd come, he didn't go to GIT, but he just somehow he got the security wasn't that strict back then. They didn't have the card IDs to swipe to
Right.
get in. He just ended up in there. We'd go to his house around the corner and skip class and figure out Alan Holsworth and Yngwie licks and stuff.
Nice.
And he actually went on to play with Alcatraz, which was with Graham Bonnet, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, very cool. I love that. That's great.
But the guitar lesson thing, right after GIT, when you're in Los Angeles, that's a good way to make money. I actually had a nighttime paper route where I deliver the LA Times at like,
Oh, wow.
I'd have to get up at like 3:34 in the morning, you deliver it. The best was when you were in an apartment complex and you just do the whole floor and you'd have a trolley with the newspapers and you'd just be dropping.
Right.
Because we had long hair, you couldn't get a job anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. So I do guitar lessons and I deliver papers by night. And long story how I met Jay, and I've told it in other interviews, but he was one of my students. He never even paid me. We lived in the same house. We were living in a house. Punky Meadows lived in this house in West Hollywood with his girlfriend. And we called it the band house And I gave him lessons just because he was there and he asked me to give him lessons. He knew David Ellefson. I remember seeing David Ellefson come through the house. I said, "Hey, nice to meet you. Never thought a thing about Megadeth." I wasn't a big Metallica fan, and Megadeth was kind of just, I don't know how long Peace Cells had been out at this time. I wasn't really paying attention because I was doing my own thing. It was kind of more in the kind of Gary Moore, John Norum, John Sykes, Thin Lizzy, with some other cool influences. It was a totally different vibe. Although the trip is I was playing with Mark Poland. Chris Poland's brother was my drummer.
Oh, wow.
It had nothing to do. It was like two different parallel universes. I was playing with Chris's brother over here, and we never mentioned Megadeth. He never mentioned Chris Poland or Megadeth.
Oh,
we were doing this totally different genre of music. He didn't play anything like he does on Return to Metropolis. He's playing more like how someone would play if they were playing with Gary Moore or Thin Lizzy, right? And in this other universe through Jay and just that guitar lesson, I ended up getting introduced to the Megadeth camp. When they hired him, and the rest is history. I was hired for $50 an hour back in that time. God, my rates are still good I need to raise my rates thinking of inflation, but to help figure out Chris Poland's solos, because we had kind of similar influences with Jeff Beck and Holsworth and Mahavishnu and Jan Hammer and that kind of thing, and help him kind of write solos for what was going to become So Far So Good So What. The catch was they only had 2 weeks to finish the album before they started tour. And so there wasn't really a way I think Jay was going to rise to the level to be the next successor to Chris Poland, right? So they cut out the middleman, and I went in and did the solos. I kind of improv'd one at a time, not really rehearsing with the band, and I only really I'd get a tape at the end of each day. The first one I got was In My Darkest Hour, and it was just like a minute. Like you'd hear like a 20-second roll up. Okay, start here. Okay, stop there. See you tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
And so that was the first one I did, and they liked that. So I think I came back the next day and did Hook and Mouth because I had already started trying to kind of write that for Jay. And that became, I tried to write something simple, but it became one of the hardest solos to execute. Like to this day, even when I wasn't in Megadeth, that's the one thing that I always kept under my fingers, because it's a great Flight of the Bumblebee kind of really difficult string skipping, weird harmonic minor scale patterns mixed with other kind of modes. So I was trying to write, I wasn't trying to sabotage his gig intentionally, but I wanted something that was cool, and it was kind of Michael Schenker. He sounded kind of like Randy Rhoads, the thing he does in Over the Mountain before his solo. I wanted something kind of like that.
Yeah.
Starting on low strings instead of the high strings, and then going up to the high strings. So I did that the next day, and I think I did that pretty quick. So they gave me a tape. I went in the other room, and I think and I did Liar, just improv that, and then next day made 502 and something else, and then we were on tour in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I was learning the songs, the rhythms at night when I'd go home, or when I had any spare time when I wasn't recording. I had to learn the Peace Cells and Killing songs that we did on the tour.
That's wild. Just must have just been a whirlwind. For you at that time.
That's the perfect word for it.
and I know or at least I believe, I may be, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the kind of your first exposure to the world, in Megadeth was in the film the Decline of Western Civilization. That was kind of your first, and then the
first time stepping on stage with Megadeth.
Yeah,
that was before like an official live gig where we played a whole show. And imagine like that's the first thing you do is this motion picture that's now like a cult classic, legendary movie. And Penelope, the director, went on to do Wayne's World next, and so that was a cool thing. Actually, when we went to the premiere at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood, I remember we weren't that excited to be in the movie because of, some of the other folks that were in it earlier. But It's cool because Aerosmith and Ozzy and even Poison are super funny in the movie with some of their lines. So
Yeah.
in hindsight, it was really cool. And I think we came off, uh, looking back, none the worse for wear. Of all the
Right.
bands, I think we still look cool when
Yeah.
you watch that today. And when you see the thing that's going to really freak people out is when they see the Live at the Whiskey, In My Darkest Hours there, and it comes off, I think, even cooler than in the movie. I mean, it comes off, and the sonically, when you first hear it, like Chris Poland, he goes, "I thought that was the album."
Oh,
So,
wow.
wait, that's the Whiskey audio. I mean, it sounds. Then all of a sudden, you'll hear the applause, or you'll hear a different lick that we might have changed. You can hear Chaz's voice is huskier, a little more Chris Cornell vibe, right? Because he also does a Soundgarden tribute in addition.
Oh,
Right?
really? Interesting. That's cool. That's really cool. I love that.
He's got a little of that in the tonsils.
That's great. Kind of to circle back with teaching and learning. I had read somewhere that you studied blues under the great Steve Hunter, of course, of Alice Cooper fame.
And Aerosmith, Train Kept a Rolling fame.
Yeah. How did that come about? What was kind of sparked your interest in going down that path?
What's a cool story? I'll try to nutshell summary it because it's actually right in the heels of Megadeth. I was doing some demos and I got hooked up with this lawyer in Century City out here that he got Rather deal. He represented Whitney Houston, Weird Al Yankovic, Journey when they had Steve Perry. Like he's a heavy hitter. And by some miracle, he knew a drummer I was playing with, and I got hooked up with him. And we got signed to Diamond Dave Management.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
And at one point, to really cut to the chase, I had the opportunity to join David Lee Roth's band. They called me one night and they played the tape to Dave, and he says he wants you to come over to his house in Pasadena tonight. Like my band was in my living room, and I didn't really think, to be honest, I didn't really dig his voice live. And even at that time, I thought, man, he's going to end up in Vegas. And it's so strange that he did.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And he didn't get great reviews either, did he? Right.
No,
So
he did not.
Maybe I made the right decision. And I know I did because Jason Becker ended up getting the gig because he was my buddy. And the album became a great album, which is Little Ain't Enough. Is that what it's called, with the Devil?
Yeah, I think so.
If I would have taken that gig, that Jason would have never had that opportunity to do what he did. I finally made that I regretted it a lot. Then I was watching his documentary, Not Dead Yet, for like the fourth, fifth time. And I busted out in tears one night and really realized that that was his destiny and he needed to do that gig. And that was like so cool for him to have that opportunity. And we were really just becoming friends. I remember right before he got sick, I saw him at NAMM and we were like really friendly, and we're kind of the same kind of like more shy, sit in our room and play guitar kind of guys. So we kind of hit it off and we were becoming friends. Well, the reason I mention him is because when he got that gig, if you think of how he plays in Cacophony, or if you know how he plays on his solo stuff, you wouldn't immediately think of him as the guy for David Lee Roth, and he couldn't really play blues at that time. So the management, who coincidentally enough also ended up signing Black Crowes, and that's who broke the Black Crowes, was Diamond Dave Management. A lot of people don't know that, but
I didn't know that.
And Pete Angelis, he directed those Gigolo and all those David Lee California Girls. He's in that video with his hair slicked back he's the Italian in the fast food store. So he was our manager, and they actually worked with Van Halen. They went with Roth. But so they sent Jason to Steve Hunter to learn how to play blues. And the second they told me, well, Jason's up studying in the Hollywood Hills, I said, I want to study with Steve Hunter. And I was up in the Hollywood Hills at his place before you could say Johnny Winter, right?
Nice.
So that was an amazing learning experience, getting to study. And a lot of people aren't aware of this. And I'm looking at all your posters on your wall because, I had some of those same posters. And I remember I had the huge Aerosmith poster that you'd get at Spencer's Gifts. And I'd be standing in front of my turntable when I'd be skipping school, figuring out, the first Aerosmith and the Get Your Wings. And then I'd get to that solo and Train Kept a Rolling. I couldn't figure out why it was so much harder than all their other solos. But I was like, man, these guys are great. Brad Whitford, Joe Perry, and man, this solo is brutal. And there's a lot of solos. When you really go back and listen to that Get Your Wings, Train Kept a Rolling, there's the halftime, which is Steve Hunter. That's him playing the wow, wow. The very first thing you hear on the radio is Steve Hunter. And everyone thinks that's Joe Perry, and it's not. And then when it goes to the snare and it sounds like it's live, the double time, the more Yardbirds part, that's Dick Wagner, his partner. And those guys, you're correct when you mentioned they were kind of like the Steve Lukather duo or the Larry Carlton duo of the 70s on all these great rock albums, from Welcome to My Nightmare to I love they're playing on Goes to Hell. The Alice album. I think if you want to hear Steve play great, I'm getting chills. I'm the Coolest on that album. He does a great blues solo, and so many great songs on that album. Steve also played like Salisbury Hill, the 12-string part on Peter Gabriel. He was in Lou Reed on like Sweet Jane and all those tracks we heard, Heroin, all that stuff from the Lou Reed live era we heard on the radio growing up. Just a great player. He played with Mitch and the Detroit Wheels. Just a great blues teacher. And he really obviously did great for Jason, because you hear how he's playing on that record. And he really helped me a lot, because sometimes when we come up, even though, the players I've mentioned had blues influence, I wasn't, and I did always love Johnny Winter. Steve made me go back and listen to Albert King, right?
Nice.
And he's like, even if you like Stevie Ray Vaughan, you go back and listen to Albert King.
Yeah.
And here's a BB King lick, by the way.
That's so cool. That's great. What an amazing story. I love that. That is great. Yeah. Yeah. Like, as you said, I mean, Hunter is, I think, a very underrated, at least in terms of kind of mainstream. I think he's very underrated. I know a lot of guitar players know who he is, but I think I always felt that he was very underrated in terms of musicality. And
if you can find on YouTube, he has a solo album, and he's kind of going blind, his eyesight. He was touring with Alice Cooper with Orianthi. A lot of people don't know.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
he wore the top hat back in the day. Like, if people Google like Alice Cooper, Steve Hunter, Dick Wagner, you'll see them live with Cooper back on those tours on the Welcome to My Nightmare. And the funny thing that people, everyone knows the Hollywood Vampires.
Yeah.
Right. With Johnny Depp and Joe Perry. Go back and look at Goes to Hell. The back cover of Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, which I actually have in my vinyl here. He called his band on that the Hollywood Vampires. So he's had that name since that album, and he just kind of recycled that name here all these years later. And isn't that strange that it's with Joe Perry, who Steve did his solo? It's kind of weird how the world all.
Yeah, it's all very cyclical, and it is bizarre.
That's a good word. Not enough people use the word cyclical.
I'm gonna get it. I'm bringing it back. Well, Jeff, this has been amazing talking to you today. I am so grateful for you to do this. And for those of you watching, in the description of this video, down below, there are links to Jeff's Facebook page, his also his webpage, as well as Kings of Thrash, their pages. You definitely want to check that out. If you have not seen these YouTube videos, you are missing out. You definitely need to jump on that and go to Cleopatra Records right now and order Best of the West from the Whiskey A Go.
Check out the tour dates.
Yeah, and check out the tour dates.
Kings of Thrash tour dates, because it kicks off in less than 2 weeks in Joliet, Illinois.
Nice.
And my Bandcamp is jeffyoungmusic.live. And that's where I'm like slowly one track at a time I'm up to three. I got three of my instrumental. Yeah, I've never released like an all instrumental album. I'm like really big on Tommy Boll, and that's one I didn't mention of the early influences, but I'm working on kind of in that vibe, and I think there's a lot of cool different influences. So I've got Monsoon, a single called In the Flesh, and Slow Burn is the latest, and that's coincidentally enough we just ended talking about blues. Slow Burn is kind of a psychedelic trance blues kind of thing, and I have Shania Twain's viola player. We started talking about the first instrument I ever played was viola.
Yeah.
On Monsoon, I got a cellist. Remember,
Yes.
I couldn't play cello. I put Monsoon on my first instrumental that I released, and on my latest, I got the viola player. But she's not playing viola. She ended up when she started playing with Shania Twain, playing fiddle. She just picked up pedal steel, and she's a virtuoso at it. Like,
Oh, wow.
but she plays it like a rock star, like with delay, and it makes it more like Pink Floyd. It's very
Oh,
cool with pedal steel on it.
very cool.
Her name's Andrea Witt, so I really recommend people check out that new single. And the Kings of Thrash coming to a town near you in every city. You know, it's going to be Best of the Midwest next, and I think we're coming back to California. We're talking about Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Mexico, South America. We've got offers. It's just a matter of, you know, and you see a lot of people in our comments saying, come here, come there, come here.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think feeling dissed if we play somewhere else first, but it's literally up to logistics and how you can juggle and arrange like dominoes the cities, so you go through in an organized fashion so you're not bouncing around and wearing yourself out. So hopefully get to everywhere on the planet before it's said and done, and the show will evolve and change, and we're gonna play a lot of cool music for everyone with a lot of love and spirit and guts.
Nice.
That's all we got. That's all we got for you.
Awesome. Well, Jeff, thank you so very much. This has been an honor and a pleasure chatting with you today. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thanks everybody for listening and checking our stuff out.
All right.